speaker of the day, or of the afternoon, until we go into the breakout sessions. And we're going to welcome comments from Melissa Elliott, also known as Missy Elliott, but not the rap star, who's a co-founder of the Young Onkwehowe United, and a Tuscarora youth activist from the Six Nations of the Grand River. She's organized her community to stop development projects on Six Nations territory being pushed through without their consent. And one example, of course, is the Line 9 reversal project. If you could please welcome Missy Elliott.
Could I call up the other Rising Tide members? Let's give them a round of applause. I'll just let them give a general introduction. They have more of the information around the facts about Line 9. And I think it would be very, very beneficial to know the facts about what we're dealing with when it comes to Enbridge and Line 9 and the issue that we're dealing with when it, with our waters, and specifically the waters, the drinking water of Toronto.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Missy, for that introduction. So I'm not sure how Louisa and I were actually selected to speak alongside Missy and such other well-known and respected activists in talking about Line 9. And then Louisa and I were talking, and maybe perhaps like that's the point, that we're not sure how we ended up here. We're not the most knowledgeable, we're not the most involved, but we do work in collaboration with the rest of our Rising Tide members. And as well as other individuals who I've seen throughout this room, which is excellent, from like no Line 9 groups in Toronto. And we also work with frontline communities and First Nations. And I guess the point I'm trying to say is that it could have been any one of these people up here. We're just two of thousands of people resisting Line 9. So, anyways. But before we begin, we would like to situate our presentation in a broader context of development and environmental degradation. If there's one message we can take away from the presentations that we've just heard, is that these issues, these projects, and these controversial legislations, they don't exist independently. They don't exist in a vacuum. So we need to consider the broader context in order to understand how each of these projects interacts with various levels of society. So Louisa's going to touch a little bit on the broad geographical context of Line 9. And this is significant because, as I just said, these projects don't exist independently. So it's not just a pipeline, it connects all the way to the tar sands, which, you know, it affects every level of society, which we will talk a little bit about. Also, this relates to how we engage with these projects. It means that resistance to them we must engage in meaningful coalitions and solidarity. We are all treaty peoples, and none of us can live freely and safely while these sorts of projects continue to exist. So whether you live in the Annex, whether you live in Jane and Finch, or you're a rural farmer in Canada, or you live in the Athabasca Valley around the tar sands, this issue affects everyone. So it's not just, this is my Lake Ontario, so I'm going to protect it. This is an issue that affects everyone, and we must all stand together and find ways to engage in meaningful solidarity in order to make sure that these projects don't continue to underride democracy and consent. So because in the theme of this conference, or this panel, I'm going to situate this Line 9 in a local context by talking a little bit about Enbridge's history in the GTA. Okay.
So the tar sands is the largest industrial project on Earth, occupying a landmass of about 140,000 square kilometers, which is roughly the size of the UK. And its expansion is proposed to quadruple. The reason for this is that it takes about 2 tons of oil sands produce 1 barrel of oil, and as you could imagine, this would have devastating impact both on the environment, on social fabric, the political landscape, the economy, and human rights. I'd like to start by talking a bit about Ground Zero in Alberta, and there will be a focus on water issues because this project is very water intensive, as it uses hot water and steam to separate the bitumen from the sand. Basically, it takes 3 to 5 barrels of water to produce 1 barrel of oil, and that could go up to 12 barrels if we're talking about open pit mining. According to Natural Resources Canada, in 2009, companies were licensed to withdraw up to 370 million cubic meters of water from the Athabasca River, and for the most part, this would be free of charge. To give you an idea, this equals twice as much the annual water use of the city of Calgary. And as the project expands, so would the water consumption. The process produces a lot of toxic sludge, which is then some of the toxins that are found in it are toxic at parts per trillion. They're deposited into tailings ponds, which at this point already there's more water in the toxic ponds than there is in natural systems. And what happens is this water that's in these tailings these tailings ponds are not lined, so it's just sand that's containing them. So these contaminants are seeping in through ground level to the soil and to the Athabasca River at a rate of about 11 million liters per day. And we have to see that right now there are 130 kilometers square of these tailings ponds along the Athabasca River. As you could imagine, this would have a lot of implications, both directly and as the demand for water increases, this water is being diverted from lakes, rivers, and farms, and it's been actually, as it stands, both the Athabasca River and the Mackenzie River are threatened, as 90% of the water that's diverted is not put back into the systems, and it's also affecting wetlands and aquifers. The industry claims that it will restore the area, but that's not possible because to do so would wipe out any of the revenue of the tar sands. Now, this also affects our policies, as we see, as Matt Barlow had mentioned, that water is becoming privatized in a sense throughout Canada, in consequence as these companies are gaining access rights, and as well the water monitoring in Athabasca is being largely turned over to industry-funded consultants. At this point in time, $120 billion have been invested in the tar sands over the past 12 years, and this year Alberta actually went into a deficit, which is projected to reach $6.3 billion by next year. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of pressure on moving this project forward.